El Cipres is the new product release from Blending Room this week, and in this video I will describe how I roasted the coffee by showing you a roast profile. I will then taste it to describe its flavours, and I'll give some suggestions about how I think you should brew it at home. El Cipres was sourced from our long-term import partners Falcon Speciality, and if you're interested in their company, their sourcing methodology, their ethos, I have put a link to their website down below, so you're very welcome to go and have a read about that company. Let's now do my favourite bit and talk about the roast profile. Before I roasted this coffee on our Loring S15 Falcon behind me, I first wanted to think about how this coffee was going to be applied. I knew that on the cupping table it was going to be something that had a bit of body, so I wanted to try and create a roast profile that would really emphasize those characteristics inside of the cup. So I needed to push the energy within it. I wanted to promote some of the acidity that I knew that was there, but at the same time have a well-developed coffee with an end temperature that would promote those body or characteristics inside of the cup. So usually I would target somewhere between 211 and 213 degrees Celsius as an end temperature. But for this coffee, I specifically wanted to allow that temperature to run on an extra couple of degrees. Another thing to note is when I actually got into the production roast, it presented itself in quite a difficult way. And what I mean by that is that some coffees just don't respond to the heat application that you had hypothesized in your roast profile design. And with this coffee, it just wanted to run away in temperatures at the end of the roast and was therefore somewhat difficult to rein in and control. You could argue that that actually lent into my overall flavor design, and that is where I wanted to promote that body. However, I also like the coffees to have some fidelity too. So controlling the thermal input is really important. So let's have a look at the roast. As you can see here, the actual curve is a pretty nice looking curve. I'm just circling on the screen now a little hump on the rate of rise, and these are some things that I like to try and keep controlled and checked. And that is a reference to the roast gaining thermal momentum when I actually didn't want it to do so. I employed a pyramid heat application because I feel that this is actually performing pretty well in the Loring roaster at this point in time. Now, I have discussed previously about a dogmatic approach, and I must challenge myself to that throughout 2025. But for this coffee, this particular heat profile worked really well. The end temperature for this roast was 214.1 degrees Celsius. I had a development time of 1 minute and 27 seconds, which represented 15.8% of the overall roast profile length. The duration of the roast was 9 minutes and 12, and I am somewhat happy with the flavors in the cup as a result of this particular profile. Going forward, I want to try and mitigate this part of the roast. And what's happening here is we're losing a bit of thermal momentum, gaining some where we don't want it, and I need to come up with a way of being able to smooth that approach out. With the profile described, now let's talk about how this transfers into flavour in the cup. As usual, I've chosen a batch filter brew in order to do this taste analysis within this video presentation. I've done so because I'm a little bit apathetic. It's 6 AM on a Friday morning and I don't really want to be faffing around with brewing. But also, a batch filter brew allows the coffee to open up as much as possible and will then be able to encourage me to taste more of the flavours that are there. So in the analysis, first I want to take an aroma assessment, and then secondly, I'll do the tasting. And on the nose, there's lots of caramel and sort of a roasted hazelnut characteristic, which I'm pretty certain will transfer into the cup, but it will lead you into feeling that it is going to be a coffee with nice body. There aren't many of those sort of fruit aromats in there, which I think is going to be a good quality of this coffee. So let's have that first taste. Right, so I like to first try to ascertain whether there are any fruits in the cup. And there are with this, but a very, very small amount. It displays a bergamot or orange oil. There's a tiny little touch of orange peel in there as well. But the fruits, therefore, are in that orange citrus type of spectrum. There isn't much of it though, mind, because the next part of the cup really comes through quickly, and that is this toffee almond-like characteristic. It's very syrupy in nature. And on the finish, you get this really lovely melee between brown sugar and dark chocolate. It is a coffee that is somewhat down on complexity, but definitely up on body and texture. So if you're a person who enjoys texture-led coffees, the El Cipres is going to be one that really suits you. So with that in mind, what would be my preferential brew method? Well, I would probably choose an espresso-based brew for this, first and foremost. The flavour qualities of the El Cipres would lend very well into a slightly restricted espresso recipe. So maybe my preferential would be a 1 to 1.55 or a 1 to 1.75. So somewhat of a ristretto, somewhat of an espresso. It would also pair incredibly well with milk. Why? Because the brown sugar and those dark chocolates and a little bit of the caramel and almond in there would, I think, pair well with a gold top Jersey-based milk. Do use that milk, don't use semi-skimmed and stuff like that, go full fat. My next method of brewing that I would lean into would be a cafetiere or full immersion brew as we call it. Why? Well, because those brew methods really promote body in the cup. The gauze at the bottom of the cafetiere will allow some particles to come through, and those particles in suspension are what promotes the texture on your palate, and this coffee has a lot of texture. This is a batch filter brew, and it performs pretty well. You get a little bit of the orange oil bergamot that comes through, but I wouldn't choose this before an espresso or a cafetiere. If I wanted to have something with somewhat of a filtration level, I would choose an AeroPress. An AeroPress has a little bit more body that comes through in the cup. You get the ability to be able to grind a touch finer than you would do in, say, a Hario V60 or Kalita Wave. And I think that's where this coffee would perform best if you wanted a slightly filtered brew. I know also some of my customers use a stovetop mocha pot, and this would work incredibly well in that as well. Now, a stovetop isn't my preferred method of brewing, but for those people who do use that, this would work very well for you. Right, that was a chat about El Cipres, the washed Red Bourbon from El Salvador, and our new product release at Blender Room for this week. Links to the product are down below. It is available now to purchase online. I'll have it at Beverly Market, and it's available between 9 and 5, Monday to Friday at the Roastery. If you pick up a bag, I hope you enjoy it. You have a great week.